called Showboat. And in that show is a terrific tune called Old Man River. That Old Man River, he must know something, don't say nothing, he just keeps rolling along. They're talking about the mighty Mississippi, that great river that flows through the center of our country from Minnesota down to the Gulf of Mexico. We're going to explore the Chicago River today. In comparison, it's puny, but the river gives birth, develops, and helps create and maximize one of the great global cities of the world, the city of Chicago. And we're going to explore that today, how the city impacted the architecture and the city itself. From a railroad, again, so the architect is making a contextual statement. He's putting his building into a historic retrospective there. We're making the turn and we're going to be leaving the Ogden Slip in a moment. And if you can, if you look to your right, you begin to see the outlines of a very tall black building, Illinois Institute of Technology, which is a university here in Chicago. The dean of the School of Architecture from 1938 to about the mid-1950s was Ludwig Mies van der Rohe. He's one of the fathers of modern architecture. And this building is modern architecture, except the shape, which we'll talk about in a moment. Look at the building. It stands on those pilates, or rounded stilts that we're going to see. The building sits right on Lake Michigan. The lake's just on the other side of the building. And those rounded corners, especially in the winter when the lake comes howling off, the wind comes howling off the lake, those rounded corners act like almost the front of an airplane wing. Anyway, today it's called the Aon Center. Aon is a very large insurance company. But the building was built in 1974 for the Standard Oil Company. And up until about 2 years ago, it was the tallest, second tallest building in the city, at 1,136 feet. It was known as Big Stand. Notice the blue windows on that very tall building and those beautiful, undulating, sensual balconies. They extend out of the building anywhere from 2 to 12 feet. It's the tallest building in the United States, designed by a female architect, Jeannie Gang, in her studio. The building is called the Aqua. It's designed in 1989 by one of our very prominent architects, now passed away. His name was Harry Weiss. And when Harry wasn't designing buildings, he liked to sail sailboats. The shape of a sail on a sailboat is very often a triangle, and that was his very favorite buildings. It's Illinois Center 1 and 2. They're nothing more than black steel and glass rectangles, plain, simple roof, no ornamentation. They stand above the ground on those stilts called pilates. Pioneers. Why pioneers on that site? In 1803, Thomas Jefferson, our president, bought from the French the Louisiana Purchase to the west. In 1803, the federal government put at the bottom of those blue staircases the Fort Dearborn. Fort Dearborn was the first permanent settlement in Chicago. We refer to Chicago as the Paris of the Prairie. Today, that's North Michigan Avenue, the Magnificent Mile. On your left, another case of that European influence, art, Beaux-Arts style from France. The building with the temple at the top, the Tempietto, the Corinthian Greek columns, the Greek urns, the Roman arch at the entryway. It was originally the London Guarantee Building. We have a double-decker roadway here on our left called Wacker Drive. Right next to it, Hotel 71, 1957, 30 years later. Look at the contrast between the modernism and the older. What was really cool about this building in 1927, if you had an office here and you had to get precious gems up to your office with security, you put them in your car, you drive your car to the building, drive it in the building, drive it into the elevator, and the elevator would take you, your car, your gems up to your office. That's the same shape as a Greek column, and it's called tripartite construction. It was the kind of architectural style used by our early architects in Chicago for their tall buildings from about 1891 to about 1920. Postmodern was a rejection of Mies van der Rohe's modernism. It said, we're sick and tired of rectangles of steel and black steel and glass. We want to do something different. So they do. If you look up the building, doesn't it look like a Greek temple that's been stretched over 50 stories? Like a chair. The flag is on the seat, the two arms in the back. 1929 by Halliburton Wood. On your left is the Builders Building, also 1927. Look at the building, you see a hybrid of styles. It's tripartite. At the top you see the Greek columns, so it's Beaux-Arts. In the middle you can see the white elements going straight up. It's Art Deco. West wall of the building, they curve it just like the river. And the river has this kind of ugly green color from the algae in the water. What do? They cover the building in this kind of green glass and green metal that's reflecting, so you can see the other buildings around it. And in 1860, at the Wigwam, the Republican Party nominated Abraham Lincoln to be their candidate for president. So that's a very significant site. Those were warehouses around 1900. They're all being converted to loft apartments because people want to live here. The tall white building with the triangular balconies is called the left. Right here, also by James Stefano, is the concave building called River Bend. Live here. He buys the building in 1980. He hires Harry Weiss. They punch in the windows. Look how thick those balcony walls. Lagrange, he's a French architect. He came to Chicago in 1965. He never went home. He found Paris in the prairie. Again, look at the architecture. The architect, look to the right. The tall building with a swoosh. Above the swoosh, it's the Boeing building with a condition back in 1912. So you had to have big windows to let in a lot of sunlight and fresh air. Germany started by Walter Gropius, and then Mies van der Rohe was in charge of it. Less is more. There's hardly anything to the building. Sam Insel's throne. Sam Insel was a very rich entrepreneur. He helped contribute a lot of money to the building, then went bankrupt during the Great Depression. Behind this great limestone wall is a 3,500-seat beautiful opera theater. It's the home of Chicago's Lyric Opera. Onion plants growing here in this very swampy river. And the Algonquin Native Americans who lived here in their own language call those very smelly onions Chicagua. At the connection, being approved. Look to your left and you see all the development that's happened here in the last dozen years in the south, 2 miles south. So the fire burns 5 miles north to south, 2 miles east to west. Burns for 48 hours. They find 125 corpses. They never figured out how many people actually died. The city had a population then of 300,000. A third of them were left homeless. And 20,000 buildings burned. Architect, there's a lot of work. But they don't go to colleges or universities, they apprentice. And they're not imbued with historical European styles of neoclassical, Gothic, Renaissance, or Baroque. And they begin to invent an American-style architecture. It's now known as the Willis Tower. When it was built, 1,450 feet, 110 stories, it was the tallest building in the world. Falls over. Bundle 9 straws together, extend them to different lengths, and you have a very strong structure. Papyrus. So who wants to take a guess? What do you think this building was in 1929? Anybody? Newspaper. It was the Chicago Daily News. 5 cookies for you. It was in Seattle, Washington. They hadn't moved here. The building wasn't designed for Boeing. It had another client. Look at the top of the building. You see that steel bridge with the round holes? You have an idea what's on your kitchen table that has round holes on the top. If you look at the building, there is no ornamentation that suggests advertising on this Art Deco building. They're facing, unfortunately, they're facing the building. They're the great merchant princes of the early 1900s. John Wanamaker, Marshall Fields, F.W. Woolworth, Montgomery Ward, Julius Rosenwald, etc., etc., etc. building. You see those enormous windows called Chicago windows to let in a lot of air and light, and the building has hardly any ornamentation. Just steel and glass with finials on the roof, those things extending up through the roof. It's the House of Blues, which was once a movie theater and bowling alley. The Hotel Saks was an office building, so it was a city within a city. And right across the way is that black building, the last building designed by Ludwig Mies van der Rohe. He dies in '69. Skidmore, Owings, and Merrill. These pilings go down to bedrock at 154 feet. Right across the way with the flag on top is that Gothic tower with the flying buttresses and the tracery looking like embroidery. That tower is modeled after the Butter Cathedral in Rouen, France, and that's the Tribune Tower, one of our major newspapers. 263 architects from 23 countries entered. The contest was won by John Howells and Raymond Hood. About their ability to hold the students' attention. They told the architect, we don't want our students looking out windows at the river daydreaming, so no windows. The building is called Modern Gothic, and right across the way by Adrian Smith, is that beautiful tall building, the NBC Tower.